Going back into history a little bit, some people don't realize when you study women's liberation, you come upon some really interesting points of fact when you go back. For instance, during the suffrage, which really kicked off this kind of phase of modern feminism. By the way, all forms of feminism are completely trash. Back when women's suffrage started. There was an all-female referendum, the only one that existed in Massachusetts in 1895, and only 4% of eligible women bothered to even vote. In 57 total towns, not a single woman voted for suffrage. Now, case in point, Susan B. Anthony, one of the loudest faces in the movement, she actually set up structures to oppose women in these referendums, knowing that they would vote against what they were pushing, right? And you say, why was this? Well, Susan B. Anthony actually said, well, they don't know better. It sounds awfully like the argument my opponent is levying against men, that women don't know better. Well, Susan B. Anthony levied that exact argument against the women who said, no, we actually don't want the right to vote. We don't want this, right? And so she says she blames their conditional servitude. Suffrage leaders like Anna Howard Shaw and the rest, they kept proposing referendums, and continuously what happened is the women, the mothers, the virtuous women of society who felt it was their duty and obligation to society to raise good human beings, the best place for them, the best thing for them to do was raise the next generation of awesome, good people, not to compete with men in arenas where even later today, they are still completely outperformed. Women's membership in the anti-suffrage activist organization outnumbered the women's membership in the pro. So the anti always outweighed. Now, it's interesting that the rhetoric is always what women wanted, what women want, what do women want now? Well, it turns out historically, and for about 70 years, actually, what women wanted was exactly the opposite of what these goblins were pushing on them at the time, right? So just for a little bit of context, right? Around the passage of about 70 years after the Seneca Falls Convention in 1848, it was after 70 years, still people weren't agreeing with this. Women. It was women. It's not men, taping their mouths shut. Don't talk, lady. The women were saying, no, we don't want this. Now, a couple of misconceptions here. Women were never formally or legally barred from education. That's often a talking point. Tracking back to 1970, women have had higher literacy and higher school graduation rates than men. Women were never banned from political activism. In fact, they had many successful lobbying organizations. It was the place in which they did things is the only thing that changed, right? So there was already women speaking on behalf of the home, on behalf of children, on behalf of other women, arguing for such things. Case in point, Prohibition came before the 19th Amendment. So that was already in place, and it didn't require them getting some sort of hired status equal to men. It wasn't required, in fact. What else we got here? The fact there's a myth that women were barred from working outside the home. They just chose otherwise, right? They mostly chose otherwise. In fact, there's a backswing now with feminism where women are starting to realize.
And it's good because here he provides the example of women affecting change, such as the prohibition thing, where women culturally forced change, like the laws to change, because, well, laws are downstream of culture, so they affected culture in a way that forced laws into being the way they want them to. So, acting like women were there's other times, not obviously here he's saying it for me, but in other places, him and his cohorts act like women didn't have power or can't have power or can't affect change, like they're just powerless and helpless, and they are dependent on men to grant them whatever it is they want, but they affect change culturally just fine. So sure that some of the ways that they do that is different, but that doesn't mean they're not doing it. Like, they're still the ones causing the changes.
What they're saying is their wants and needs at an individual level is more important than the duty for them to be a part of society and reproduce the next generation of society. Meanwhile, to argue that you ought to have rights, you're arguing simultaneously that someone else has the duty to defend those rights, and never is it you. Never is it you. So my question to the
I don't know what he means by never. Like, there's many ways to defend rights. Like, sure, force is part of it, but most of the way that we protect rights is kind of bureaucracy type stuff. Like, governments run mostly on bureaucracy. Very rarely does it get to actual force. Like, if you compare the amount of bureaucracy and paperwork and fines and whatever you get for violating whatever to how many times you actually physically get beat up or even physically threatened, eh, it's way like out of the ballpark, not even comparable.
feminists listening and the opposition tonight is simply asking, well, if men have a duty to defend your rights, what duty do you have to society if they're the ones defending your rights? You have no duties. Feminism has zero duties, and it's impossible to say something's good for society over time if there's no duty.
I don't know what he means by feminism has zero duties. Feminism isn't like a person, first, so I don't know what he means by that, but um, if if we're a little generous here and kind of give him some more leeway and say that, okay, well, maybe he's talking about women. Do women, like feminist women, have duties? Sure, everybody has duties to everybody else. You have a duty not to murder other people. Other people have the same duty not to murder you and others, and you have a duty not to steal, etc. Things like that. So everybody has a duty to respect others' rights and protect them when possible. So I think that applies to everybody pretty much across the board. So I don't know what he means by that. Like that feminism has no duties.
What did I say? No, no, I didn't say that. I said your leverage. Would you agree that men's leverage in society is pure power, pure force?
Maybe, yeah.
Well, it is. I mean, if you had to ask men for rights, it's because you couldn't actually take them and make them yourself. You needed the brute force, right?
You're asking men for it. You're asking the government, which, well, and it depending on the case, is men or women, but splitting it up by gender is arbitrary here. Like, there's no good reason to do that because that's not what it's about. Like, if it, I don't know. I'm just not a fan about making this all like men versus women thing. It's weird, and I understand that part of it is, okay, well, it's women as a gender are the ones that sometimes didn't have legal rights, but that doesn't mean that they were asking like only men. They were also asking other women because, like in his example, it was other women that didn't want to vote. They didn't want the other women to vote. So they were asking society as a whole, like, should women, part of society, have these legal rights? And other women also didn't want them. Like he said, like at the time, there were other women that didn't want them either. So a lot of it was up to them as well. You know, some of them had to be convinced and change their minds of, et cetera, et cetera. So it's not like you're only asking men. You're asking society and you're asking the government. And I think, like we've established, and I would say most people that I've come across agree that politics is downstream from culture. And I think women probably have more of a hold over culture than men do. Overall, I think it's not unreasonable to say that women have quite a bit of power over politics as well, being downstream from culture itself. So even when they didn't have the right to vote
Because
or
men
whatever, sorry, I didn't mean to click on that yet. So
You get to live out your life without a duty to maintain and produce the next generation of society. Meanwhile, expecting the men who hold the majority of force, the monopoly of force, to protect.
okay, do we know what monopoly means? Mono, one, monopoly. So I think last time I was looking into this for the whole like force doctrine series, women are like 15% of the police force, for instance. I didn't look into the military, probably something similar. So 85% isn't monopoly, okay? Sure, men are a majority of like physical enforcers. That doesn't mean it's a monopoly. So just because you're a single gender, just because a single gender is the majority of something doesn't mean that that gender is like entitled to something special or what, like that. That makes no sense. Like there's a lot of different disparities in all kinds of things. Like maybe a certain race has a certain thing about having like less money than other races in general. It doesn't mean that that race or other race or any other particular race has we like assign them different things financially. Like that shouldn't be the case. We should assign financial need based on like we should assign financial benefits based on financial need, not based on race. So for instance, if say there's a city and like 80% of say that the majority of people who are poor in that city happen to be black. Say like 80% of the poor people are happen to be black. We don't go and say, okay, well now all the black people get financial benefits. We say, well, all of the poor people get financial benefits if you do the whole financial benefits thing, which is a different topic. It's a different topic entirely, whether people should get benefits or not. But it would be wrong to say, well, the black people get it. Because it would be better to say that people who are financially needy get it, because that would make more sense, right? And if it just so happens that like the majority of them end up being black, like so what? So it doesn't have anything to do with the concept of what's being done. There, he's like, well, what duty do women have? Because men have this monopoly on force. So I think he wants her to say that women should do the whole kids thing, but he's also saying that basically everything is dependent on force. Like if not for force, like making it really this like central point, and everything else is kind of whatever. You can force your way into anything. So if men have this monopoly on this thing, force, that is the end all and be all of all the things, then by that logic, it would make sense that men would have all of the duties that come with it if they have the monopoly on the thing that matters the most and can decide everything else. Like once you have force, everything else falls into place because you can whip everybody into submission, supposedly. So, like, even by his logic, what he's saying doesn't make sense. Not that I agree with any of that, obviously, but even by what he's saying, it just doesn't fit. Just doesn't fit together.
We ought to have X rights, privileges, freedoms. I get to do this. We get to do this, right? We're women. Roar, hear me roar. And then when we go, well, who's going to enforce that if it's violated? Who enforces that you have that? And then they go, well, men, of course. And we go,
I don't think it's men. I think it's a combination of men and women. And okay, so what if like majority of police is men? There's still like a decent minority of women. That doesn't make it all men. And a lot of police work is like pulling people over and giving out tickets. Like most of enforcing rights in general is like paperwork. It's financial kinds of things. Like very, very rarely does it get to actual physical violence and force and that sort of stuff. So uh, I think women are perfectly capable of doing all of this paperwork stuff. And I think, in fact, it is probably majority women that do all the, like secretary type paperwork type things that involve like court cases and things like that. So I don't know what he's talking about here.
why do
Gradually, you're
no,
seeing women in different places of leadership.
Malish, even opening up this idea that now you're free to pursue, I'm telling you that the statistics show once you open the gates and let women pursue whatever they want, they still end up in the same focused places of work and that are proper to their nature. Nursing, teaching, caretaking, extracurricular stuff.
Okay, so he's just making my point for me. Women choose to do these things. Maybe if they wanted to, more of them would be cops or whatever. Like, honestly, the gun is a great equalizer, and women can be trained to use guns just fine. So I would prefer, like, I would really prefer most of the cops be men. Like, I would prefer that. But that's because we're not in a gender war. That's because we're not like women are fighting for our rights against men here. We're not like women have to, learn to do all this stuff and to use force because, we're going to fight the men. Like that, if that was the world we lived in, I would say women could and would go into police and learn to use guns and do whatever it took, and they're perfectly capable of using guns if they train to do it to defend their rights or whatever it is they need to do. Because they choose to do these other things, like he's saying, there are more men in these positions. That doesn't mean women can't do it. It's they choose to do these other important things. And there are differences in genders that make one like more suited for certain types of positions and stuff like that. So I don't like he's destroying his own points all over the place.